Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Grant Kastner. I am Extempore's community manager. It is so great to be here with you all today. This is one of our first extempore focused sessions, taking advantage of extempore's versatility with creative assessments. We're going to learn all about what that means as we go on today. This is part of Extempore's 2022 PD Extravaganza. That's why you are here. That's the link that you came from our Sketch platform where we're hosting all of our sessions. You can check out the previous workshops from today with Dr. Fernandez and Dr. Henshaw, as well as the future workshops that are coming up and sessions later this week. Like I said, my name is Grant. I am Extempore's community manager, and I'm so happy to be here with you today. This is a very informal session. Please, if you have any questions at any time, put something in the chat. You are free to unmute and interrupt me. That's totally fine. I'm all here for it. And without further ado, let's jump into it. So today, intro and session objectives. What are we doing? This is, like I said, our PD Extravaganza. You know all about it. We have sessions, we have workshops, we have extempore focused presentations, everything this week that you could want on second language acquisition, communicative language teaching, special presentations on extempore. That's what we are here to do this week. Who am I? I'm Grant. I am our community manager. I do a lot of our marketing and webinar stuff and writing blogs. I am also a licensed Chinese teacher here in Minnesota. I taught Chinese at the high school level this past year. Really love language teaching. I love learning languages. It's just a big passion of mine. And then Extempore is the speaking practice app where I work here, and we do all sorts of stuff with language assessments and how can we build proficiency using this platform and how can we use it as a tool within our classes. And that's really who we are. If you want to learn more about Extempore, if you haven't heard of us before and you want to get a bit more background on what we do and who we are, come check us out. There are a couple of other sessions within Sketch. We have a walk-in session, and we also have like an Extempore review session where you can just learn and get the basics on how the platform works. So what are creative assessments? That's one thing that we're going to talk about today. Where does this term creative assessments come from? And then we're going to look at some examples. The bulk of this presentation is just going to be looking at some examples of creative assessments on extempore. I didn't have a better word for creative. There probably is a better one out there, maybe versatile or flexible or efficient, time-saving, I don't know. But we'll look at input-based creative assessments. We'll look at output-based creative assessments. We're going to learn how to hack multiple choice and really make the best of our multiple choice assessments that aren't 30 questions long. And then finally, once we look at all of these combined, we're going to put together an assessment of different types of assessments on extempore. And of course, at the end, we'll have time. I'll share with you some resources, some feedback, and we'll of course have time for question and answer as we go. So without further ado, let's hop into it. So what are creative assessments? A lot of text on this slide here. We're going to walk through it. I want to first ask, what do your assessments look like? Just an open-ended question to get started. What do your assessments look like? Obviously, you're not going to share with me right now, but you can put in the chat, talk about what's a basic assessment that you might use in your class. How would you assess input? How would you assess output? Whether it's formative or summative, what might be an example of an assessment? I put a link in my slide. I'm going to be vulnerable and show you one of my assessments that I use. I do a lot of Cloze exercise, CLOZE, where students have to fill in. This is one of my examples. I gave this assessment earlier this year. Just a very basic fill in the blank. Do the students know the vocabulary? Do they not? We have to interpret and be able to choose the right word from here. This is an example of my assessment. Like I said, if you're willing to, please feel free to share in the chat. Melanie says, Flipgrid for oral assessment. Sure. Like to use a lot of infographics for interpretive reading. Callie, fantastic. Caitlin, you can speak Chinese. Tai Banla, awesome. Melanie, voice threads. Boom cards. I don't know what boom cards are. That's cool. Simple short answer responses, oral and written. Thank you, Celeste. I appreciate that. Presentations and essays. Sure. That's perfect, Shimara. Any others that we have that you'd like to share? Quizlet, yeah, of course. Quizlet, super easy. Everybody knows Quizlet. Thank you, Esley. Skits, Cahoots. Yeah. Students create a video explaining how to create a dish that they like to eat. Sure, absolutely, Shannon. It's a good example. So everybody has their own. Go full screen. There we go. So everybody has their own types of assessments that we use, and that's fine. It's not like I'm gonna stop using those Cloze assessments anymore. That's just a sample of an assessment that I do. So when I think about standard assessments, particularly like a textbook type of assessment, what would you see as something that comes out and they say, okay, this is what you need to use to assess your students? To me, they're lengthy, they're long. A lot of things that I've seen previously, and at least ones that I grew up taking when I was learning Spanish, French, and Chinese, they're really long. I don't really know why they're so long, but they just are. And so a long assessment for a student also means a longer assessment for us to grade as well. And we don't want to do that. They're repetitive as well. It just feels like there's a lot of just the same question over and over, but just trying to answer it in a different way. And then also just using this really basic question and answer format. So the assessments that we're going to look at today, these creative assessments, the focus really is shorter questions, which take a bit longer to understand. Not a long time, not like 10 minutes per question, but they just take a little bit longer. It's not like you look at the question, you immediately know the answer. And so this gives us more exertion on behalf of the student. The student has to do more to show us that they're understanding what's going on in the question and that they're comprehending and or producing the language that is relevant in your class at the time. I also put another adjective below here, efficient. They are efficient assessment. They do not take up 30, 40, or 50 minutes of class time. When you actually step back and think about it, does an assessment really need to take that long? I can't really see justification of why an assessment needs to take that long. 20 minutes or less, ideally less than 10 minutes, right? If assessment is 20 minutes or less, to me, like I said, ideally 10 minutes or less, that's where we want to be with these efficient creative assessments. And of course, I love a good meme. I want you to have absolute creative freedom on your project, but you have to do it this way. To me, that's a standard assessment. Creative assessments, we want our students to have a little bit more freedom. Okay, let's keep going. So we're going to look at 3 different types of creative assessments today on Extempore. The first, input-based. These are open-ended input questions, right? Sequencing and sequence dictation, as well as mediation. When we come back from these examples, I'm going to change my screen share for a second. When we come back from these examples, we're going to talk about the real world applicability of these questions. So I've changed sharing. Can we see my new screen now? Like a yes or a nod would be good. Thank you, Melanie. Fantastic. So here we are. We have, let me refresh this page real quick. So open-ended input questions. What that means is that we're not looking at, they're not multiple choice questions. They're open-ended input questions, okay? So let's see 2 examples here of open-ended input questions. The first example is a mediation. I give this example a lot to people who are first learning about the Extempore platform. What mediation is a type of assessment where if I speak Chinese, okay, and I'm with a friend at a Chinese restaurant who does not speak Chinese, well, that person, if they look at this menu here, they're not going to be able to order, right? They can't read the Chinese, they can't produce the Chinese. However, I can order for that person. But the goal here of this assessment of mediation is for me to take, the language learner, to take what I see on this menu, as well as what I am hearing from this audio file, and tell my friend about how the restaurant Laoban, the owner of this restaurant, how does this person describe the food? So that if my friend Thomas comes with me to this restaurant and he says, hey, Grant, what can I get from this restaurant? Well, I can look at the menu, I can interpret the menu, I can ask the guy at the counter and say, hey, what's good, in target language, of course, and then tell Thomas, relay that information and say, hey, yeah, this is what you can get. And from that mediation, I've proven that I can interpret the target language. And the last thing I'm going to emphasize with this is that interpretation, that response that the student would record here, comes in English, right? Because your friend, whoever you're mediating for, they can't understand the target language. There's nothing wrong with that. So we need to help them. We need to say, okay, I can understand this on the menu, and I can understand this from what this guy said in this clip. And now I'm going to show you, I'm going to tell you in English what this guy said so that I can help you order something in the target language. And just to emphasize, this is not a translation exercise by any means. It's getting the gist, picking out things that you understand, and sharing that with somebody who needs help. So I'll play the audio file.
应该说韭菜水饺是最受欢迎的。对，大家越来越喜欢吃那个。然后鸭血馄饨我个人觉得很好吃，可是好像人家不想吃啊。最后呢，我们也有锅贴，用辣椒酱蘸一蘸，真的很棒，你应该尝一下。
So I listen to the clip. I look at the menu again and I say, okay, I think I got this. I'm gonna record my response now and tell my friend what he can order. I click record. And then I can tell the friend, hey, he said that the pot stickers were really good and that they have these dumplings where if you dip them in this fancy chili sauce that they have, it tastes really, really good. Stop recording. I'm done. I've interpreted, right? I can submit this response and my teacher can listen and say, oh, he picked out a couple of things on the menu that were there. That shows comprehension. and he picked out a couple of things that the speaker in the audio file said. That's comprehension. Okay. So that's one example of open-ended input. I talked a lot here about mediation. Any questions before I move on? You can unmute and speak or just put a question in the chat. Up to you.
So Grant,
yeah, sure.
You responded in English to show that you could interpret and give an explanation rather than just repeating what the video said.
Yeah, that's the main reason. There's two reasons behind this, right? One, if Callie, if you and I are going to get Chinese food, can you speak Chinese? Indeed, that is a problem, right? So I would need to tell you in English. I can't say, oh yeah, hey, I'm gonna speak Chinese to you, Callie. I hope you can understand. No, the mediation occurs when I'm telling you in English that this is what I saw on the menu. This is what this person said to me. And that result, that evidence that you have, or lack of, tells you what the student understood from that text and that audio file. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay, cool.
It's more like a comprehensive assessment.
Yeah,
I would think that would be.
It's definitely it's fully input-based, comprehension-based assessment. The student doesn't have to produce anything in the target language until they have to order, of course. But they have to, like I said, understand the target language and then share what they understood. Not the whole thing. You don't have to translate every single word that the guy said, right? But pick out a few pieces here and there and relay that to their interlocutor. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Callie, for chipping in. Okay, so that is open-ended input number 1. We can move on now. Oh, here we go. 2 questions. Amanda says, are you asking because you are concerned about the 90% rule for using the target language? I'm not sure if that's to me, Amanda, or maybe it's to Callie. Perhaps you can clarify. And then Shannon.
I was just kind of curious about where the question was coming from.
That was,
I think.
No, go ahead, sorry.
Not at all disagreeing or concerned about your answer. What anything. It was just that I was wondering if that's where that was coming from. If you're, if the prompt is in Chinese and the response is in English, then does it seem like we shouldn't be allowed to do that? Like that would not be good pedagogy. And I don't think there's any reason to think that that's not good pedagogy. You just want to make sure that you're doing what you want to do for the right reasons and that the way you're doing it matches what your goal is for that activity.
Yeah, I was just clarifying to make sure I knew why they were answering in English.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right.
No, and just like that, just also with the audio response, it could very well be a text response too as well. I've shown previous examples where, very common occurrence, say you're in the target language country, you're staying in a hotel or a hostel or something, and you leave to get food because you can speak the target language. Your friend says, hey, by the way, can you just text me and tell me what they have? I'm vegetarian too, so I can't eat certain things. Text me and tell me, and then the student can say, okay, you look at a menu in the target language, send a text in English showing, hey, what did you understand from this menu? All right, I'm going to click submit attempt. Oh, I saw another question. It said, oh, can you listen? How many times a student listen to the audio file? Shannon, this is a question that we get quite often. Here's my answer for that. So we don't have, I'm going to try to explain this as clear as possible. We don't have a way to limit how many times a student can listen to the audio file. However, what you can do is you can put a timer on this question, right? This audio file is 20 seconds long. I could put a timer on this question of, say, 1 minute and 20 seconds. And that would allow the student to listen to the audio file 2, 3, even 4 times if they needed to. Right? So you could put a timer on this question, and then within that time, that would say how many times that they could listen to that response, that they could listen to the audio file. Wow. One example, and we're already 15 minutes into our presentation. Lots to go. Okay, let's keep going. I'm going to submit my response. Hopefully that makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, thank you, Shannon.
It's more.
Sure, go ahead.
I think it's more realistic because that's what we do on a daily basis. We're always doing that from one to the other for other people all the time. So I think it's more realistic and it's more what they're going to be expecting to be doing anyway. So.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And Melanie, it's something that I've done many times in my own life, having to mediate for people.
Oh yeah, I do it every day.
All the time.
Hundreds of times a day. I stop counting,
So, okay, our second example here is what's called a sequence dictation. Now, we talk about real world applicability. I think mediation, we can all see the real world relevance in that. You're going to listen to this and be like, oh, well, Grant, I don't really understand real world relevance. And perhaps there isn't a whole lot of real world relevance in sequence dictation. However, that does not mean that it's not a valid assessment for your students. Here's the thing. We all know what dictation is. You hear something and you type it out in the target language, right? But there's an element of dictation by itself where a student can just type out what they hear and not necessarily understand everything in the audio file, whatever they're listening to, right? So what happens here is with a sequence dictation, there's an extra step added onto it, sequencing, putting something in order. So I'm going to go through the directions here. Read and listen carefully. This is an assessment that I gave my students earlier this year, complete copy of it. You will hear 6 different lines of speech. There will be clear pauses in between each one, so you know when to stop and start typing. First, type out what you hear in Chinese characters. That's part 1 of this dictation, okay? Then unscramble the sentences / the text to form a proper dialogue by placing the correct number next to that line. There are 6 total lines. For example, I heard it's going to rain. What's the weather like today? Obviously, you would not answer the question before you actually hear the question. So this would come first, this would come second. I'm going to get to this strong fact soon. The first thing I'm going to do is just play this so you can understand what I mean by the pauses and what the student has to do.
原来如此，看起来我应该上白老师的生物课。
That'll be line 1. You can hear 3 or 4 seconds of a pause.
集合课，我喜欢。
Okay. So the student, again, I can play this all the way through and then I can start typing. The student would hear that, they would type out what they hear, they would type out every single line, and then we say, okay, here's a line, and then put what they think. After they type out, however many lines of text, right? Then what they have to do, what makes this comprehension, what makes this, in my opinion, a creative assessment, is that they have to understand what each line says and really understand it to the point where, can you put these in order and tell me the right order that these should go in? Now, granted, there comes a time when if you have more than 8, 9 sentences, it's going to get pretty complicated, and then the student is going to be overwhelmed. So you really have to find that sweet spot. I think 5 or 6 is pretty good, where the student really has to understand it, put it in order, and say, hey, this sentence goes first, this sentence goes second, this sentence goes third, this sentence goes fourth. Right? That tells me the student understands and they know what order that should go in. So it's not just typing out what they hear, spelling it correctly, putting the correct diacritics. Oh my gosh. Seriously, Zoom just gave me a pop-up. I'm not sure why. Okay. Spelling it correctly, putting the correct diacritics, choosing the right characters, choosing the right kanji, whatever language they're speaking, that's going to determine their success on the dictation. But it's also understanding it and then putting it in the proper order. This last part on the bottom, one strong fact. Here's what I mean by a strong fact. This is obviously not a common term in language education. It's something I use in my own classes. What I mean by that is that if you have lines of text here, right, and you have 2 characters, say Bob and Steve or whatever, and Steve said this line, a weak fact, if I tell my students, that you cannot say, oh, Steve asked a question. You don't know what the question is. You have to really be specific. Strong means you give details that really prove that you understand what the text was about. So instead of that, you could say, okay, Xiaoming is sad, or Joe is sad because he knows it's going to rain. That would be a strong fact. And it's just another layer of this assessment that tells me that my student understood what they heard, and as well as what they typed out in this assessment, in this sequence dictation question.
I have a question about those.
Yeah, go ahead, Melanie.
I have set some of those up in my courses that I did, and I was working on them last week.
Sure.
But I still don't see anything in there where they can, like, I have a toggle button to those
The accent?
special characters. Yeah.
Oh, right. So we have a way of accessing that. I'll wait until the end and I can show you how to get those on your computer. Okay. Okay, fantastic. So I'm gonna hop back if I can find it. Oh, okay. I'm gonna jump back real quick to the slides that I had, and we will jump into another set. I'm gonna share again. Here we go. Okay. So back to our slides here. Input-based assessments. We saw them, open-ended input questions. We saw the mediation, that's open-ended. We saw sequence dictations, that's open-ended. Real-world applicability. The mediation seemed to resonate with a lot of you guys. Fantastic. I think they're really real-world. I do them all the time. A lot of us have mediated before for people who can't speak the language that we can speak. And then sequence and sequence dictations. Perhaps they don't have the most real-world applicability. They're not exactly this grand task of a language, but I still think that they're really valid and handy assessments to use in a language course. We can move on to input-based, non-input, closed input assessments. Any questions before I continue? Okay, awesome. Let's keep going. So our next section we have is input-based assessments, multiple choice, hacking multiple choice, creative and efficient interpretive assessments. How can I make these questions meaning-based? We're going to look at a bunch of different examples here. Comprehension questions in the shared language, so not in the target language, shared language, which is not mentioned, which statement is false. Using images and audio files as choices, using more than 4 choices, gasp in your response. Cloze assessments, where you fill in the blank, and then sequencing again as an assessment as well. I'm going to bring back my other screen and we can look at some more. Okay. Back. All right, cool. So manage class. No, not here. I go back. Okay, here, that's okay. All right, so I'm going to come back to my Extempore student portal page. This is where the students complete all of their assessments, create assessments. All right, hacking multiple choice. That's what we are doing right now. So we're going to see a whole bunch of different multiple choice questions that you could use on Extempore. And here I think is where you're really going to see where the creative and versatility that Extempore has really comes into play. First question, super straightforward. Actually, it's not. I was thinking of something else. Anyways, this question, choose the most logical response to the question. And you'll see here, this is a bit different because here the student has to listen to the question.
哎，小妹，集合课怎么样？
Then you have 5 different audio choices, not 4, 5 different audio choices. I could make it 6, 7, 8, 9, however many I wanted, but 5 that the student has to listen and choose the logical response. Click play all and we'll hear every single one of these.
我听说王维丽这个周末没有空，他来不及。哎，你今年要上化学课吗？好难，而且老师很无聊，大部分的学生不喜欢。好容易啊，我非常喜欢体育课。我同意，有道理。
So there, I have a question here in Chinese that the student has to listen, then they have to understand. To prove that they understand that, they have 5 different audio files that they have to choose, one of which is the right one. I emphasize adding more than 4 choices because it's a way to just lower the chances that they can guess and get this one right? And so what I like about Extempore with this option of adding audio files as a multiple choice response is that the student has to pick. It's not just, did you understand? Can you choose what the logical response is, right, for this question? And at the same time, you could also, not just audio files, you could also add images as a correct response. So you could have a description and say, choose the description that matches, choose the image that matches this description, whether it's a person or a class or a place. And you could also flip that and have the image be the prompt and say, okay, which audio file matches this picture that you see here? Lots and lots of creativity available for this type of question. Thank you, Kid. Yeah, I love these types of questions. It might seem like, well, this is really basic, but at the same time, it's like, well, no, the student has to understand all of these and this, and then pair them together to come up with the correct response. That's one question.
Is it number 5?
Is it number 5?
Wait, 4 or 5?
我同意，有道理。
It's 4.
Oh, I was right. I thought it was 5. 4.
哎，小妹，集合课怎么样？
So the first question.
How are you? No,
No.
how is something? No.
集合课, how is geometry class?
Yeah, how is, yeah, I got the how.
And then all of these, the first 3, I believe, mention another class, right? And then the 4th one is the only one where it doesn't, and it says, oh, it's fine.
好容易啊！
Oh, it's really easy.
我非常喜欢体育课。
Oh no, it was probably another one. I made a mistake. Anyways, it's another one in there. See, that's proof. I have to listen to them
Yeah.
all. I don't even remember this, right?
Yeah.
I just proved my own point. Not that I don't speak Chinese. I do. I promise you. Okay, let's jump in and keep going. Yeah, this is really handy. So again, like I said, you see here, listen, and then they have to listen to these multiple times to tell you, okay, yeah, I really understood what the right one is. How to students choose a correct. Oh, you have the little circle here. So I'll play these again.
我听说王维丽这个周末没有。
That's not. I don't care about his weekend.
哎，你今年要上化学课吗？
No, that's asking somebody something.
好难，
Oh,
而且老师很无聊，
oh,
大部分的学生不喜欢。
oh, okay. So it's really hard and the teacher is super boring. Most kids don't like it. Choose your response right here. Click submit. Done. Got it right. Let's keep going. 2, which is not answerable. So here, the previous one we had was listening. Here we have a reading text, right? The student has to read this whole thing. And then the question here at the bottom, which of the following questions cannot be answered based on this text? Now, there is a reason why I choose cannot be answered versus can be answered. And as well as not just asking a basic question like, what does a student like, right? Because here, these types of questions where the student has to look at each one of these and say, is that information in the text? Is that information in the text? Is that information text? 5 times. Again, you could add 6, 7, 8 responses and really make it complex. I think 5 or 6 really is enough. But as opposed to saying which of the following questions can be answered, well, they look and they find it once and they find the information, done, I found my answer. Make it even harder. What cannot be answered based on this text, right? What classes does the author prefer to take? Can you find that in there? What science class will the narrator take next year? Is that in here? What are the student's opinion as a physics teacher? Is that in here? They have to understand another reason. Well, you might say, well, Grant, this is in English. Why would you do this in English? Simple. If this was in Chinese, well, then the students can just pick out what they see left and right. You might be able to do that, right? You don't even know Chinese, but you see some similar characters here and there. And you say, oh, well, that one kind of looks like it, and you don't even know what it means. This is where the element of meaning really comes in on this type of question, right? The student has to understand, 1, what this massive paragraph of text says, and 2, if these questions are present, if the answers to these questions are present in this text. Is it real world? No, not necessarily, but we're looking to assess our students. This is a valid assessment question, right? Again, like I said, add 2 or 3 more options in here, and then it really gets complex, and the student really has to know what it says. What's the right answer? I believe it's this one. What science class will the narrator take next year is not in this text. Click my response, click submit, keep going. Number 3, close, very simple. Not a whole lot for me to say here. Fill in the blank, do you know which word goes in that blank? 1, it tells me, do you know what this text says? If you know what this text says, do you know which word goes in this text? Do you know what these words mean? This is one for a closed response. I'm not hesitant to put 6, 7, 8 possible responses, again, to really have that student prove to me that they understand what the correct answer is and that they understand what this text says. 小明的朋友跟我说, Xiaoming's friend told me blank 的化学课非常难. Somebody's chemistry class is really hard. Teacher Wang's chemistry class is really hard. Show us what happens if you get it wrong. Well, nothing really happens if you get it wrong, except for the fact that you get it wrong. So when I click submit, that goes to graded. Well, look at me, I'm so smart. They're all I can see check, and then next question, check, next question, check. If I got it wrong, it would just show up as an X and say 0 out of 1. That's all. Number 4, sequencing. So I wanted to talk about this and explain a couple things. We can see here, we have a sequencing text for the student to sequence. Now, how do I put this? I'm not against using sequencing as a multiple choice question. However, you can probably understand why I would have certain reservations about using it, particularly because, say, you have all these answers here, and in theory, you could put every possible permutation of 1, 2, 3, 4 as a response, but then that's just going to get really overwhelming, and it's going to be really long. And then the other thing is, if say the answer was this last one, 4, 3, 1, 2, well, then all they have to do is determine that 4 comes first, and then there are none others where 4 comes first, and they pick that, and then that's the answer. You get the idea, right? It could work, but that's why I'm also going to be partial towards the open-ended version, because then the student has to come up with it on their own, right? And they don't have to be fiddling through different responses. No, you just tell me, do you understand what this says? Do you know what order it should go? Versus going back and forth constantly between multiple choice responses. That's sequencing. And then finally, a little softball here, easiest one possible. This is the basic one that I was going for at the beginning. Simple, choose the correct response. I have an image here. The question asks,
维明是哪国人?
What nationality is Wei Ming? Then you have to read the responses, and the student has to say, oh, well, I understand what these responses mean. Can I identify what nationality he is? Well, then I have to know the flag, so hopefully you've taught your flags by then. I recognize, oh, he's from Taiwan. Can I recognize which one is Taiwan? It's the second one, right? And then I can click submit and move on. The other thing that I would add about this response, right? Even if you don't speak Chinese, you can see that all of these responses start and end with the same thing. Another thing you could do, again, 5, 6, 7 choices, put sentences that are just entirely different, right? It's really up to you on how you want to experiment and use different responses, but do what you can to add a bit of difficulty to the questions. That's what makes these efficient. You have 5 or 6 choices. The student really has to show that they understand what they heard as well as what they are reading in the answer choices. We have hacked multiple choice. We have hacked it a lot. Any questions or comments before we move on to some open-ended responses?
How do you upload your pictures in there?
So not only what you can do is you can come visit me at one of our times afterward, and I can show you how to create an assessment and add the pictures. It's very, very simple and straightforward. Okay, I'll allow some. Okay, so we have completed it. Well, okay, I will finish this assessment. I think it's this one. I don't know. Finish this assessment. Hooray, I did all the multiple choice questions. I'm all done. And now I can come back and come to Freetalk, oral reading, open response. Here we have open-ended, output-based responses. The student is no longer interpreting anything. They are producing the language to give you a response. Let's see some different types of questions that we can use for these responses. Click in one. One is basic Freetalk. We saw this image earlier. Say as much as you can about the picture attached using the details provided. And you could do this in any language, right? I made this picture in Canva. It took me like 3 minutes to whip this up. This is a really good pre and post test, particularly if you just want to measure vocabulary growth. If you're talking about how to introduce someone, say their name, say how old they are, say what grade they're in, say their nationality, all those things. This is really good to use. You know, what can my students say? How much can they say about this text? You know, Xiaobai is 14 years old. He is American. He is in 10th grade. Xiaoping is Chinese. She is 15 years old. She is in 11th grade. But how much can they also take that language and really make something else of it? For example, combining sentences. Xiaoping is 15 years old, but Wei Ming is 16 years old. Xiaoping is in 11th grade and Wei Ming is in 12th grade. It's a really good way just to measure their progression and how much they can say from, say, early September to late October, or whatever other frame of time that you want to use for your students. This is a Freetalk, open-ended oral response for your students to do on Extempore. They click record, a nice little countdown, and they can begin speaking again, whatever your target language is. Stop, not going to save that. We'll keep going. Freetalk, basic or image response, respond to image, saying as much as you can. Next one that we have uses that exact same image, except here it's a little bit of a combination of input and output. Here's why. Student has to read the text below in the target language. I am partial to oral reading. I love oral reading. I think it's really valuable. It gets a little bit of flack sometimes. I can understand why, but if you add an element of meaning to it, where the student really has to understand what they're reading, again, understanding, then it becomes a valuable assessment, and it's very, very straightforward and simple to do. Here's what happens. Simple. We look at the picture. We have 3 sentences here. We determine, 1, we read them properly to practice our pronunciation and speak the language. But 2, we also have to say whether that sentence is true or false. For example, I can click record as a student. I have 3 sentences in 3 different languages. Wei Ming tiene 14 años. Is Wei Ming 14 years old? True or false?
False.
False, indeed. Thank you. Xiaobai is 10 年级. Is Xiaobai in 10th grade? Hey, that's true. So I'm proving, as I'm speaking, I'm proving that 1, I can speak the language. I can read the characters. This is really valuable, particularly if you teach a language that uses a different script, like I do. Xiaobai is Chinoise. Is Xiaobai French? No, he is not. He is American. That's false. Right. So here I can speak the language. I can interpret it and tell you that I understand it, but also producing it at the same time, right, and saying what it means. Finish that one. I think I had a comment here. Let's see. Lauren says the first one is similar to those types of speaking tasks found on the stamp for us and full proficiency test. Yeah, exactly. 3. One of my favorite. Write as much as you can. So this is the same thing as the first one, except it's just a written response instead of a spoken response. That is all. One thing you may have noticed, people who have used Extempore previously, is that in this assessment, we have seen an audio response and a written response because, yes, now you can combine different response types. That's a big deal for us. 4, last one, super simple. It's a message response. Respond to the message accordingly below in Chinese. So whether it's audio response or text response, the student has to read the response. They have to understand the response. Then they have to respond to it and say, hey, I can help you with this, or I can respond, I can do whatever you're asking me to do. Read the message, respond appropriately. Okay, that's what the student has to do. This talks about the student, they lost their bike on campus and they're looking for it and they don't know where it is. Please help me find my bike. How would you respond to this? Right? How much can you say to say, oh, I don't know where your bike is. Oh, I last saw it at this place or at that place, or what can you produce in the target language to respond to this message accordingly? It's really basic, it's really open-ended, but at the same time, it's a valid assessment to say, hey, how much do you understand in this text? And how much can you produce in the target language to tell me that you understand this text here. We have seen output-based assessments. I'm going to hop back to my slides real quick.
One question.
Sure. Go for it.
Are those 3 lines, are they all linked or are they individual messages?
That's one message, just broken up into
Okay.
paragraphs. That's all. I just like to have it that way, so it's a bit easy. It's a bit more digestible for my students to take in. That's all.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Good question. Okay, we just looked at output-based assessments, oral reading, true or false. That's a version of input as well. Free writes and a picture response. Message response can be written. Message response can be spoken. And then respond to audio. That's the same as a message response. I put at the bottom. We want these assessments to be low pressure and as clear as possible for our students. Okay, I think I had an audio. Are we good audio? Can we hear me? Are we good?
So on these, you don't really like have a rubric for them to grade?
You
or
can't,
how-
so Melanie, you can add, mine currently are without rubrics. I just wanted to show the assessment itself, but you can add rubrics as you build them. And that's something that I can walk you through.
Well, I didn't know if all of them actually needed rubrics because sometimes
They don't
there's
per se.
kids and they don't do as well. If they know they're getting a grade, they freak out.
Sure.
But if they don't get a grade, sometimes they do better.
Right. So
I don't know, it's psychological.
it's really up to you and how you want to form your assessments, whether or not you want to include rubrics or not, right? So we saw output-based assessments. Now, to wrap this up, we can put them together. Let's put together some of these assessments and see what it looks like. And for once, I'm going to be smart enough to combine my Chrome tabs so that I don't have to keep switching. So for me, this is my own personal experience. This is me using Extempore. What I've done, what works for me this year, it's purely my own experience. A comprehensive creative assessment on Extempore could have the following. One open-ended input question. I love sequence dictations. They're challenging, they're hard, but when students get them right and they get them perfect, which is really hard to do, I know that student is on top of things. 2 multiple choice questions, pretty straightforward. I like a what's not answerable question, like the one I showed earlier, and then a close, very basic, and then 1 open-ended output question as well, to really wrap up the whole thing. Of course, there are dozens of other assessment methods that you can use, but when it comes to making an assessment that's valid, that's efficient, but that still serves as a good representation of what my students know, this is sort of my go-to. Let's see what that looks like. I'm going to come back here, combined assessment, okay? And as I go through, ignore the description here. As I go through these, I click on the first one, sequence dictation. If I had to guess, say there's 6 lines, 5 lines, I would say this would take the longest, right? 3, 4, 5 minutes if they're hearing it enough. And you say, well, wow, 5 minutes to complete one question. That's all I need to know that 1, they can hear and they can listen to the language properly and they understand it. And 2, that they can read it properly as well and put something in order. So yeah, like I said in the beginning of this presentation, it takes a little bit longer. There's a lot more that the student has to actually do in this question, but it really proves to me what they know in the language. That's the first one. Second one, multiple choice. This is the one that I showed earlier. Tell me you can read and understand this. Tell me you can pick the right one out of these. You can say what's not found in this text. Third, as I mentioned, is just a basic close. I, for one, might make this longer and just include more choices. The other thing that I would warn about is that, like with the sequencing that I mentioned earlier, it's very tempting to put 2 different blanks here, of course, right? And then put 2 different responses. But again, then you run the risk of having, oh, well, I know the first one is this, so I can already eliminate the rest of the other ones, right? So that's why I'm hesitant to do that. Again, more than 4 answers, 5, 6, 7, however many you need. And then finally, the last one, a message response. This is all one message and have the student respond to it. So if I jump back real quick, this type of question, if the student understands, again, I think this one might take 2 or 3 minutes. A closed response, in reality, maybe I'm being ambitious here, 30 seconds, a minute, if that, really. if the student gets it. And then the message response maybe 2, 3, 4 minutes as well. So you're looking, I don't know, a 12 or 13-minute assessment. Perhaps I'm a bit optimistic of my students' ability, but I like to give them the benefit of the doubt as well and think that they'll be able to do well. So that's really the combined assessment. I don't want to talk too much else. We've gone for about 42 minutes already. I was worried I'd be short on time, but there you have it, combined assessment. And then just a brief little recap of what we've done. We looked at some input-based assessments. We looked at output-based assessments. We saw all sorts of different assessments. We saw open-ended input. We saw multiple choice input. We hacked our multiple choice. Output-based assessments, manifold multiple choice questions, and then a comprehensive creative assessment that I like to use in my classes. And just to add some context, I like to do those types of assessments. Like say I created that 4-question assessment. In my classroom, I would probably carve out the last 20 minutes of class, and this is what they would do. So I said 20 minutes is the ideal for efficiency. Hopefully most of them finish beforehand, then they can have the rest of the class free. That would be the assessment that I would like to use. Lauren, of course, you may share the recordings. I will have it up soon. Some resources I have linked here. Our blog, I will upload this slide deck to Sketch for you to access. We have our blog, check it out. I am the author. I write a lot of things about using extempore and language teaching. We have our Bytes YouTube channel, which is still up and coming, where you can access all of these cool walkthroughs and neat little videos just like this on how to use extempore. And we have a main YouTube channel where you will find the recording of this presentation as well as the 2 previous workshops from today and all of the other presentations to come here in this extempore PD Extravaganza. And finally, of course, stay tuned for the upcoming blog on creative assessments. I will, yeah, sure, Celeste, I'd be glad to put those links in the chat for you guys. The last thing that I'll say, I will pause the screen on this slide. Please, thank you so much, first of all, for attending this presentation. It means a lot that you took time to be here, especially if you were already at the previous 2 workshops. It means a lot that you're here. Please take a few minutes to complete the feedback form. I'm going to copy this link. I'll put it in the chat for you. Once you complete this feedback form, some of you may already know. Oh no, sorry, that's to go to everybody. Once you complete the feedback form, please, that earns you a spot in our giveaway. So if you get up to 3 different entries, so say we have, I think we have 13, 14 different presentations this week, maybe even more. You can only get 3 max, but of course, please fill out the feedback form for the presenter so that they can get information on how they did and get feedback and do better next time. Of course, we all know why we use feedback. QR code is there as well if you would like to make use of it. And then you'll get 3 entries. You will get 3 maximum entries, 1 per feedback form. So this will not give you 3, this will give you 1. 3 entries into our giveaway to win a $50 gift card to Target to prep for your school year this year. And then you can earn 1 more entry if you tweet us at using hashtag extemporepd for this year. Thank you so much for attending. I'm going to put those links to our blog and YouTube channels in chat. And if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute, put something in the chat, and I'm happy to answer them. Celeste, thank you for attending. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
Of course.
Thanks.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. And if you are interested in CEUs, that is a request we get often. What you can do, there is what am I trying to say? There is a FAQ form on providing how we provide CEUs to you. We cannot guarantee that you get CEUs for this presentation, but we can offer you certificates of attendance. And again, we can't guarantee anything, but you can email my colleague thomas.mer@extempore.com. You can find, I'm going to put another link in the chat for you to access that FAQ doc. And then you can contact him and tell him once you're done. So the idea also behind the CEUs, if you plan on attending more sessions this week, please wait to email Thomas, because then, I have them all at once and he can give you one document that says all of the sessions that you attended during our PD extravaganza. Stop sharing. Hopefully we got everything. I see so many faces still here. It's so great to see you all. Amanda, Caitlin, Callie, Melanie. So good to see you.
Thank you, Grant.
Of course. Thank you guys for being here. Any questions? I'll be around, and I will likely see many of you at future presentations this week. Take care, y'all.